Okay, let's be honest here. We were all taught health myths growing up and, admittedly, still believe some of them. But is it my fault that I got sick because I stood out in the rain? You're dang right it is. At least that's what my mother told me, who probably heard it from her mom, who probably heard it from her mom and her mom and her mom and her mom. That's mostly a harmless little myth. Will believing that the rain caused me to get sick really impact my health? Of course not. However, have I got a couple much more interesting and worrying misconceptions being spread amongst the youth nowadays. I'll even give you a little teaser. Mountain Dew, yes, the soda, eliminates or reduces the risk of pregnancy because it depletes sperm in men. Teenage years are full of puberty and lots of new, let's say, feelings. Feelings that many don't feel comfortable bringing up to a parent. Come on, I'm assuming we were all there at one point. But without a safe and trusted space, rumors about Mountain Dew and pregnancy go unchecked. Sex ed has become so much more than what it is characterized as. Not only are classes taught by trained and knowledgeable experts, they also provide an open space to ask questions and discuss healthy relationship dynamics, social media health, and of course, where did that hair come from? Do the do with me and Kimberly Molitor as we explore the association of long-term health with comprehensive sex ed and reveal the other interesting birth control.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Policy in Pink. I'm here with Kimberly Molitor from Teen Empower. Kimberly, can you just introduce yourself?
Hello, Kimberly Molitor. I'm the Executive Director of Teen Empower. We're a nonprofit located in the Oklahoma City metro area.
And can you give a little overview of how Teen Empower is empowering teens?
Well, we actually get to go into schools and we get to teach comprehensive sexual health programs to middle school and high school students. So we are the boots on the ground in the classrooms trying to do all the good work.
That sounds like a very easy job right now.
We do what we can.
So you've mentioned before to me personally that you kind of have like this passion, you just kind of for helping people, getting out in the community. How did you kind of fall into this?
It's kind of weird because I didn't even know like this field was a thing in Oklahoma. I feel like that's a lot of people don't know that this is even a thing in Oklahoma. You know, sex ed's not even mandated. And so why would these programs exist? But actually, the former executive director and founder of Teen Empower, Kathy Harms, I'd known her. And then as I was trying to finish my degree, kind of doing some internships led me more involved with Teen Empower. And then also getting to know some of the other partner agencies and our collaboration. And then like have it, Teen Empower got some funding. I got a job. And so it was just always like, I think a lot of people always say the education we had, when I was in middle school was nothing. So just to be able to go in and educate the young people on things that they have every right to know about their bodies and, how they function and how to make decisions as they're getting older, it seemed like a great job. And I've been with it ever since.
So working around middle school and high schoolers, I'm sure they have some very precocious questions and actions, I guess you could say, going into the schools. And if you can, have you had one of those moments that just kind of make you chuckle or just kind of hang your head and laugh?
A lot, yes. And I feel like it's so weird to say, but my favorite part about being in the classroom with the students is when they get to ask their own questions. So we always do anonymous question boxes because that's what they truly want to know. Like we come in with the information and the programs that we follow, but when they have the opportunity to freely ask what they want to know, if it's something they've heard or if it's a myth or what is this? Can you get pregnant by doing this? Can you get an STD? That's my favorite part. That's my favorite moments. And yes, they're the questions, all of us educators go through many trainings of answering anonymous questions because it's, fix your face, have that poker face on, because we don't want to discredit them. But there are those moments of okay, yeah, this is a great question. And kind of that, the shocking questions that you get. But yeah, I think that's the best part to me as an educator being in the classroom was being able to answer the questions for them. And yes, they're silly. Yes, they're shock value, but deep down it's because they really want to know it. Maybe they just don't know how to ask it. So
I once saw, I've seen this joke where it's my face doesn't know how to use its quiet voice. And that's become like a rallying cry for me. And I'll just say bravo to you and your educators for being able to have your face keep its quiet voice.
Yes. I think one of the tips I always give is try not to answer the questions the same day. Take them home and read them, because then you can get out all of that, like, oh my gosh, what are they trying to say? Or sometimes you even have to Google stuff yourself to figure out what is happening. Like, wait, this is a new word. I don't know what this means. And so I always like to suggest taking them home and then answering them the next day, just to kind of give that a little bit of time of processing.
So digging into a little deep on sex ed, and we're going to talk a little bit about the STIs and prevention in Oklahoma as well. So before we kind of get into that, you use the word, well-rounded, comprehensive, and I don't think a lot of people know what that means. So what would be a comprehensive definition as a starting point?
So I think the easiest way I like to explain, because I think you're right. A lot of people is like, oh, you teach sex ed. So you're going in there and you're talking about positions and you're talking about how to do it. And, all of a sudden it's like, no, that is absolutely not what we're doing. Sex ed is so much more than that. It is about how to form boundaries for themselves, how to set goals for themselves, and how so they can stay focused on those goals when they're growing up and making decisions. It's healthy relationships, not just with a partner, but with your peers, your classmates, your families. So what do those healthy relationships look like? It's about consent. And yes, there is consent, and everybody needs to know about consent and how you give it, how you receive it, so everybody is staying safe. Yes, it's about teen pregnancy prevention. So obviously we talk about how to prevent teen births. STI prevention. So we do talk about ways to prevent the transmissions of sexually transmitted infections. But it's so much more than just those two main things. They're life skills, essentially.
We alluded to it in the opening a little bit. How is sex ed going in Oklahoma? And I think also really importantly, how is Teen Empower handling or sailing through the rough patches right now?
So, sex ed in Oklahoma, like I said, it's not mandated. So I'm going to say it's not going great as a whole state, just because not everybody gets programs. It is very slim out there when you think of the state as a whole. I think, when you think about Tulsa or when you think about OKC, there are a lot of organizations out there getting to provide these programs. But the farther out you go, it's just slim pickings. So as a whole state, probably not great. Teen Empower, we're getting through it. We have great partnerships with the school we work with. And so we're always invited back because they understand the benefits of our program. The teachers there, the parents there, we normally always get 100% attendance on our consent forms because the parents know that this information is valuable for their kids to have. So honestly, Teen Empower, we're doing okay. We have a very small staff. And so kind of our resources are limited, but we're out there. We're still with our schools. We're making those connections for them and providing the resources wherever we can.
That's so cool that you all are able to get a 100% on the consent forms and attendance from students. That is really impressive, especially when you hear some of the rhetoric, which is this is just to inform parents. It's well, they're being informed.
They are.
And they say yes.
Yes. We normally always get, and we do active permission. So what that means is they actually have to opt into our program. So it's not an opt-out form. So parents actually have to sign it and send them back. And again, the teachers are great partners because they'll send out notices to the parents and guardians of hey, these are going home today. Because again, it takes that village and it takes that community, and Teen Empower has been around for so long, even though, we're small and we're in our small little community, we have supported that community. And so they want us there and they want those programs for their students because they see how valuable it is.
That is an incredible partnership to have.
Yes, it is.
So you mentioned Teen Empower has been around for a little while, and you mentioned also that you've been with Teen Empower for a little while as well. Has the path for sex ed always been this bumpy, or has the rhetoric changed? Because right now it's a lot of parents' rights and all of this. Has this kind of always been the course since just as long as you can remember?
As long as I can remember, I feel a lot of it is just, there's not a lot. I feel now there is a lot of awareness around it. I feel in the past, there just wasn't that many conversations about it. And if it was, again, if permission forms went home or we did parent preview nights, that was the only time some of these schools heard about sex education in the classrooms, or that these are something that's provided. I feel a lot of people believe that there is some sort of sex ed mandate. Honestly, health there's only been a health mandate for Oklahoma since like last year. And so I think a lot of people believe that these programs are just kind of happening naturally in regular classes. It's like, no, they're not, because again, there's, other than the HIV mandate, there's nothing else that's required. And so I think there's some negative attention right now. However, getting out of just like this small little bubble of like that minority group that's saying a lot of the negativity stuff, there's so much positivity around it. And because we see that, again, we're on the ground, we're in the schools, we talk to the parents, we talk to the guardians. And again, it's thank you for doing this. I love what you do. How can we support you even more? We hear more of that, of you guys are doing great things. I feel like it's always going to be bumpy for at least a while. And it's always going to be this back and forth of, oh, we're in a good few years. Oh, now we're getting bumpy again.
You mentioned, and you know, we don't have to really go into the HIV mandate, but you mentioned that there's the health mandate from like, I think it might have been 2 years ago. And then the 2 years ago was the health mandate. And then, but Oklahoma's had the HIV mandate for what, since 2000-ish? Oh,
the HIV mandate's because it's really old. So it's been around like 80s, 90s. It's been around that they have. So yeah, there has to be, I think it's actually called the AIDS mandate, honestly. So, I mean, the mandate has not been updated, but it's there. And so schools still follow that mandate, which a lot of our programs cover that for them.
And I'm sure your education is significantly more inclusive and research appropriate.
Yes.
And
yes.
Just in case for listeners who don't want to go out and look at it, it is very homophobic. Mm-hmm. It is very like sex negative, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. Like it is an interesting piece of work.
Yes. And I mean, not only, we're obviously comfortable doing it because we're trained in all of that, but even to help out some of those teachers, like the state health department, they always put out their program every year that schools can use to follow this mandate. But I don't think a lot of schools are using that. So that's the other thing too. You never really know what schools are doing what to kind of check this box for the mandate. You know, are they using the state? Do they have their own program? Who's teaching it? Are those teachers even comfortable? Like that's a struggle as well when you talk about these programs, you know, sex ed programs of like, if you're going to force a teacher to do it, and they don't want to, it's probably not going to be the best ran program.
So would you say that Oklahoma teens are kind of, now that sex ed is back under that microscope, mm-hmm. we're seeing a lot of laws around it, we're seeing a lot of discussion around it. Do you think teens are receiving the well-rounded, comprehensive, like sex ed and reproductive education that
the teens in our programs and in our partner programs, yes. But again, as you go as a whole, there are so many teens who are not getting this information. I mean, social media and how they have access to so much stuff just readily available to them, not knowing how to make sure that information they're getting is actually accurate, you know, or scientific based. So no, I don't think every teen is getting everything that they need to go be a well-rounded human into the world. Unfortunately not, because just there's not a lot of us out there doing this work and being the boots on the ground in the classes.
I feel like misconceptions amongst, you know, like teens and middle schoolers and high schoolers around reproductive health and just that general kind of knowledge. I feel like there's trends as to what the misconceptions mm-hmm. can be. I remember at one point there was the trend of misconception, and it might still be, I don't know, I'm not around that age group anymore, of what a healthy menstrual cycle was called a period because there should only be a drop or a period of blood. I don't know if you've heard that one, but I remember hearing that one.
I've heard that one before, yes.
So I guess my question is like, you know, what's kind of like the trend right now that you're seeing that's a misconception, and is again, like Oklahoma or just the teens in your program being educated is like why that's not entirely correct?
We always debunk anything that we hear. Always one of the first things. And a lot of those comes up in those anonymous questions of like, Oh my gosh, there's been like a yellow Skittle will prevent pregnancy, or like Mountain Dew will lower people's sperm count. Peeing after sex will prevent a pregnancy. So it's a lot of just people not even knowing their own body systems and how that works. So yes, we obviously go in and debunk all of that information because we teach them about the body parts, how bodies function. So we go in and so we tell them, we keep it to the body parts of like, you have this body part, this is what's going to be happening.
I think this is one of the few times I think I'm actually dumbfounded and just confused of yellow Skittle, specifically a yellow Skittle.
It has to be the yellow Skittle. Yeah.
Okay.
If it's inserted,
like I said,
if it's inserted in the vagina, just it will make a pregnancy not happen.
Oh gosh. I did not expect to, like, I am very thrown off right now. That's gotten me. Okay. Oh, God. I'm glad that you are all out debunking that one.
That's like our good little segue into, which is why whatever you see on the internet is not always true, because people create these websites and Photoshops about the blue waffle and that's what it looks like. And it's like, okay, so again, this is another lesson. Not everything you read on the internet is true.
Yeah. I like how you're also teaching internet health as well.
Yes.
So, talking about these tools, talking about these myths, talking about all of these things that you're educating teens in Oklahoma, students about, in the education that you're giving, is like risk reduction of like STIs, is that being taught?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think depending on the age, because we always do age appropriate. So specifically for Teen Empower, the programs, we have a 6th grade program and we have an 8th grade program. And then we do also have a high school program. So depending on that grade level. So 6th grade, they're not going to get like a full condom demonstration and they're not going to get a full birth control demonstration. That specifically is around them building their boundaries, them really kind of starting to think about these conversations and these healthy relationships at more of like a peer level and like classmates, and how you handle conversations, not just romantic conversations, but conversations in general with your teachers, your parents at home, wherever that looks like for them. And so it's goal setting for them. We do talk about STIs and pregnancy prevention in there. That one is going to be like abstinence. Of course, that's 100% way to avoid all of this. It never fails. The class always brings up, well, what about condoms? And of course, yes, condoms are an effective method to use. You're going to learn more about that as you get older into the older programs. Because, they know it's out there. 6th graders, They know a lot. Whether it's right or wrong, they know a lot. And so that's kind of the conversations that take place in the 6th grade classroom, which again, their questions always lead back to some of those risk reductions. We're here to provide you information so you have everything you need if and when you ever decide to make this choice in your life. We always put it back on, we're just here to give you basic information. Talk to your trusted adult that you have in your life. Find that person that you can go and talk to. Go talk to your medical providers. There's so many places people can go to get free services. If it is a parent, great. If it's a guardian, great. If it's an aunt, if it's a counselor, if it's a teacher, whoever that person might be, have somebody else to talk to, because we're only with them about 10 to 15 days and then we move on. So we always push it back on, who do you have in your life that you can continue to have these conversations with.
I think it's so interesting, though, that you all do condom demonstrations, because I know when I went through sex ed and I was living in California at the time, they didn't do condom demonstrations. Like, they showed what a condom was, they pulled it out, but like they weren't allowed to do the demo itself. When you are kind of doing those condom demonstrations, or maybe some of those other birth control demonstrations, are you also teaching some of those, I guess, like key things that you might not think of, like the expiration dates, using water-based lubes, not keeping a condom in a wallet, those, I guess, next step up?
Yeah, it's not just, here's your condom, here you open it, here you put it on. No, and if anything, the programs we follow, them being the evidence-based programs, they are written and they have those steps already outlined. So essentially, if you're teaching that evidence-based program, which is what we do, we follow that. There's a script in place and all of those steps are already in there. We get into those very specific things for them. And then when you see all those steps, it's like, wow, that's overwhelming. This is going to take forever. But then when they actually see the process, it's like, it really doesn't take that long. We just want to make sure everyone has that understanding of like quick checks, you're good to go.
So the reason I asked kind of about that, like condom expiration, water-based, so those details is, as you know, we've talked about it. Oklahoma is they already criminalize some STIs, and they want to like double, if not triple, the list of those STIs they want to make a felony. And the term that they use in there is the term reckless transmission, and that's not defined.
No, it's like, what does that mean?
So. Exactly. That's just it. It's like, so I guess my genuine question is like, are Oklahoma, like not just Teen Empower, like are Oklahoma teens being told and taught how to avoid a felony?
We definitely don't word it like that.
Well, obviously, I'm a policy person. I think nothing but doom and gloom.
Right? No, we definitely, and I think, and that's, to me, that's a scare tactic, which scare tactics don't work. I mean, if anything, when I read that, to me, my first thing was like, okay, cool. So people aren't going to go get tested anymore. That's what's going to happen. So we're going to continue to see this uptick in STI rates, especially within the 15 to 24. That's because they don't want to get in trouble for recklessly passing it to somebody else. We tell them how we try to take the shame away from it. It's like, yeah, can getting tested be embarrassing? Yeah, going to the doctor can always be a little embarrassing, but there are places specifically made for teens to go and do this and to feel safe and to feel comfortable. We push a lot of the fact that most STIs don't have any symptoms. So we also don't show pictures of STI on body parts because that's like worst case scenario for a lot of people. And again, when you think of like students and being those concrete thinkers, they're going to look at that and be like, oh, I don't see any of that going on. I'm fine. We tell how it's transmitted, the fluids that transmit some of these STIs, and the body parts that are involved with that. But then ultimately, just getting tested is always the best bet for anybody.
I think you really got the point across when it was like criminalization is not how to get someone, is not risk reduction.
I mean, again, we're all about prevention here. So how do we prevent STI transmission? How do we prevent pregnancies? Well, you got to talk about this stuff in order to prevent it from happening.
Right. You have to know the risk of just.
Yes.
I'm not trying to imply that there's like sex is risky. It's just like that's just tends to be the term is risk reduction. Or harm reduction.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and I just want to plug real quick that the policy proposal that we're talking about would include very common STIs like HPV and genital herpes. And the reckless transmission would be a 2-year minimum in prison as a felony. So
no, that's
I've been stopped.
What do you say? For one,
I know
HPV, you can't even test a male-bodied person for HPV. You can only test a female-bodied person for that. So how is that going to work? I'd like to know more information on that. Just criminalize more female-bodied people, okay? But yes, there are STIs that are curable. So why are we going to punish people and criminalize them for a curable STI? Okay.
And this was like this question, this whole bit right here was the entire reason I wanted to talk to you, because it's like, okay, we have this terrible public health idea. What's the real reason? What's the real way we get to our end goal?
Yeah. Educate people. We want to educate people and not scare them, especially young people, because that's not going to work.
Especially young people. It's like, there's how many jokes are out there about that.
Right.
So coming all the way back to full circle, when you started talking about that healthy relationship stuff, trafficking, consent, and domestic violence are all being discussed. Would you say that they are also research-based and proactive in what is effective? So
you might have to tell me a little bit more. I know the little bit on the consent one was that you don't actually have to teach consent, to talk about sex ed, which that one's just silly to me. Why are we not wanting to talk about consent in general? And actually, fun fact, there is a consent mandate that if you teach sex ed, then you have to teach consent, which we were doing anyways, but now we just tailor it a little bit more to match that consent mandate.
Oh yeah. And in reference to the consent one real quick, it was so interesting to watch. It was an interesting discussion. The trafficking bill is a very, very detailed curriculum in the bill to the point that it's like you have to teach so I'm making up the numbers, but it's like 8 hours, like 16 hours, but you can only do it in 4-hour chunks. They have to be 3 days apart from each other.
Wow.
And the reason I am so intrigued by this bill is because it lists all the things that someone would have to cover, and including one of them that's like teaching kids to, the way it reads is to like be vigilantes and save people from trafficking situations. It's definitely like the consent one where someone has created a whole curriculum based on like a good idea that already exists.
Right. Well, because I mean, I will say in our high school programs, there actually are lessons on human trafficking. Like those conversations are already taking place. And again, based on a program, an evidence-based program. So again, it was researched, it was evaluated, has proven outcomes, positive proven outcomes. It's already in there. It's already happening.
Yes, this one it's very detailed, and a lot of the stuff that's outlined is like, okay. And what's even more interesting about the human trafficking one is it's very human trafficking and in relation to like sex trafficking, and doesn't talk about like employment trafficking. It's like, okay.
There's other types of trafficking out there, just human trafficking for various things.
Yeah, various things. So I would, that one has some gems. And needless to say, I think we're both on the same page of it's probably not research-based.
Probably. I mean, again, if you're also just trying to teach programs like every 3 days, like that seems weird to me. Why do we have to wait so many, like, what is the basis behind that time frame? What is the research behind that?
I know.
What is the expertise level behind how this was written? Just curious.
I question. I am too. Yeah. I am too. Again, it's like, this is a good idea. Yes, let's reduce human trafficking.
Right.
Let's do that.
Not making jokes about that. That is very serious. But yes, I think there's appropriate ways to go about forming those conversations and how to be effective with it.
So as we come to a close, I do have a little bit of a loaded question for you. Okay. And I kind of alluded to it earlier, but let's just put it out there. Summary. So is it safe to say that to reduce STI transmission and advance healthy relationships, we need sex ed?
Yes. In my opinion, we need to educate people, because that's the only way that you are going to reduce the risk of transmission. I don't feel like we need to be criminalizing any more people for something that, one, they may not even know how it even is transmitted. And also that, again, like I said earlier, that just to me sounds like a reason to have people not get tested, which then we're going to have rates through the roof of trying to get people treated for different STIs. If it's treatable or curable, whichever one that might be, it's going to be through the roof once they do finally have to get tested because they become so sick because they have an untreated STI.
Right. And forgot to mention it earlier, but you mentioned like inclusive education and transmission fluids. I know I've seen and heard well into like my 20s of people who had certain ideals when it came to like penetrative sex between two men. And it was like, no, that's not how the body works.
No.
Even like well into the 20s, because it's not taught. It's not taught.
Yeah. It's still that society mindset still moving forward and the way we teach it, we don't get into specific types of relationships. We don't get into specific types of identity. It's more or less, it comes down to the body parts, what bodies have which fluids and how those fluids are transmitted. And the body parts that skin to skin genital contact. If there are sores or blisters present, depending on the STI, it can be transmitted that way as well. So we focus on more of like, these body parts and these fluids is what puts people at risk if they come in contact with somebody who has an STI. Like, this is the risk factor there. So how do we form that barrier method between said body parts and fluids? Education.
Yes, education. So as we come to the close, this has been great. I just have two last questions. What would you say is kind of like the thing you would blast out to put it on a billboard, put it on a megaphone in the middle of this house chamber? Like, what would you just really want them to know?
I think for me, what I always kind of say to people and encourage people is ask questions. Talk to somebody who is quote unquote an expert in that field. Because again, going all the way back to like what people believe sex ed is versus what it actually is, it all comes down to just asking the questions. There are so many people in my life when I tell them what I do, it's like, oh, so like, what do you talk about? And I get into all of that and they're like, oh my gosh, that is great information. Like I didn't have that growing up. That's great that you get to do that. Because they took the time to ask the questions. I think that's something that is so important. Parents and guardians, call us, ask us what we're teaching, ask us what we're talking about, review the materials. Like we are so open for that. Because if anything, the more people that truly understand what's being done, the more the conversations can continue outside of the classroom when we are done teaching them. Like that's the only way it's going to keep moving forward is because again, like I said, we're there for a short amount of time. We give them a lot of information in that short time, but we need them to keep having those conversations and having those resources.
I like how it kind of just boils down to demystify sex ed.
I mean, yeah. Yeah.
Maybe sex ed needs to go under a rebranding campaign. Not
Right?
called sex ed.
So much more than that.
So last question, the general, roundup of where can everyone find out more about you or Teen Empower and where they can donate and support you all?
So our website, teenempower.org, great place to start. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram. Another thing I forgot to mention earlier about Teen Empower that also kind of sets it aside from other organizations is we actually have a peer educator program, which means we recruit high school students and we train them on some of our lessons from our curriculum that we teach. And then they come in and teach with us. It's called SHAPE, Sexual Health and Peer Education. There is more information about that on our website as well. But yeah, so it's fun just to bring in those high school students and have that true like really youth cool engagement in that voice.
That's a really cool program, especially you're right. Like identification with someone much closer to your age right? Is much more likely.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Kimberly, so much. This has been so great to talk to you.
This was fun. It's always fun to have conversations like this.
I know. I keep telling people, I'm like, I talk about STIs way more than
way too much.
Way too much. Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been Policy in Pink, presented by Metriarch, a public health think tank dedicated to Oklahoma women. Join me, Tommy, and a parade of esteemed experts every other week as we discuss the political banter surrounding women's health. Find out more about the topics featured at matriarchok.org. That's Metriarch with an E, a fun little play on matriarch and metrics. You can also find us across social media as Metriarch OK. Thank you to our producer, Rant9 and Jesse Ulrich. And once again, my name is Tommy. And remember, all policy is health policy.